Om Parthaya Pratibodhidam Bhagavada Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gradidam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaidam Rudavarshinim Bhagavadim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatva Manusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine Avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. We are discussing a very interesting topic, Bhagavad Gita as a manual for everyday life. We know that Bhagavad Gita is considered to be one of the most profound spiritual classics known to human civilization, and it is part of a much bigger classical work, the Mahabharata. Gita is only around 700 verses, divided into 18 chapters in the form of a dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna. And it is a very small fragment of what is arguably the most celebrated classic in Sanskrit language, a literary classic, so to speak, the Mahabharata. It is not only the most celebrated literary classic, it's also the biggest, the largest literary work known to mankind, more than 100,000 verses. This is the size of the book Mahabharata from where Gita is taken. Now, what is so great about Gita? On the one hand, it contains a very profound philosophical system, a very profound philosophical thought system is expounded elaborately in this small work. Gita, as we understand today, became so well known because of the masterly touch of a great Indian thinker and saint who lived in the 8th century, Shankaracharya. Before Shankaracharya wrote a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, in the 8th century, Gita was not so well known because there are many other small poems in the Bhagavad Purana and also Mahabharata, which are known as Gita. Gita means sung, and Bhagavad Gita means a song sung by God, an incarnation. That's the idea behind. So this particular work became so prominent and so well known and became a celebrated spiritual classic because Shankaracharya wrote a commentary on it. And in that commentary, he makes a very profound statement. Tadidam Gita Shastram Samasta Vedartha Sangraha Bhudam. So he says, this Gita, this Bhagavad Gita, is a science of life. It's not just a philosophical work alone. It is certainly a very profound philosophical work. But more than that, it is a Gita Shastram. It is a science of life. And then it is the summary of the condensed form of all the great spiritual and philosophical ideas enshrined in the Vedic literature. So that was Shankaracharya's own definition of what Gita is all about. Now let us enter the text. As I mentioned earlier, it is taken from the Mahabharata. And in fact, the setting in which Gita is expounded itself is very unique. Maybe that's one of the reasons why you find many thinkers, in fact, some of the greatest names in America's cultural history, philosophical heritage, had a profound respect for Gita, starting from Emerson, Thoreau, Whitman, the founder of Christian Science movement, Miss Mary Baker Eddy, and many of the thinkers in the US and also in Europe were highly influenced by the teachings of Gita, and its influence in Gita, its popularity began almost in the later decades of 18th century in Europe. So that is the significance of it. Now, why it becomes so important as a manual for everyday life? You know, it is a dialogue between a man who was facing a difficult question in his life, and he put some questions to his spiritual mentor, Lord Krishna. So Arjuna is the one who asked these questions. And of course, the setting is in a battlefield, but we should not misunderstand that it has anything to do with battle or war. It is a symbolic setting. Actually, the war or battle is going on within our own mind. When we face conflicts in different life situations, what to do and what not to do and how to do things. Often this happens in our life. We know we have to do something. It's our duty, it's our obligation. We cannot get out of it. And it is a very painful thing to do. It is very unpleasant. And we don't know the outcome of what we are going to do. So many of us will have to face such problems, such dilemmas in our everyday life. We cannot always expect to do things which are obviously good, pleasant. We will have a happy ending. We can never be sure about it. There is always an unknown factor, an uncertainty involved very often in many of our critical situations in life. So how to face a situation where you have to do something, but you are not sure it is proper to do that. That's the problem of unpleasant duty or unpleasant obligations. So the 28th verse of the first chapter contains a question by Arjuna. Dustvemam sujanam Krishna yutsum samavasthidam sidanti mama gatrani mukham cha parishishyadi vebodhuscha sharire me rama khasascha jayade gandivam samsade hasta tukchaiva paridekhyate. So in our own life we may have to face these problems. So here Arjuna says, well, when I look around, I am seeing my friends and relatives and close acquaintances, elders and others around me. How can I do my duty? And Arjuna was a soldier whose duty was to fight, to protect the unprotected people, the weaker sections of society, the poor people, women folk, children. That was his duty as a soldier. It's just a symbolic setting, we should remember. So the whole setting is symbolic. We should never ever interpret this book as something which has anything to do with battle or war. So Vyasa has selected a very symbolic setting. I mean, the field is our own mind. We have to do something, so what to do? So Arjuna is facing a kind of dilemma, a big conflict. In the first chapter, 28th verse, that's how Arjuna really begins his long conversation, long dialogue with Krishna. And at the end of the 18th chapter, which is towards the end of the text, Arjuna makes a statement after listening to the Gita, after listening to the entire episode, the entire text from his teacher. Arjuna makes another statement and he says, well, now I am free from doubts. I shall act according to your instruction. I feel quite happy. I can see my way through these problems. Now I'm sure, I know what I should do and how I should do, how I should interpret life and world in a spiritual perspective. So, nashto moha smidillabdha tutprasadar maya achyuta sthidosmi gada sandeha karishe vachanam tava. To the end of the 18th chapter, Arjuna says, I am free from all doubts or conflicts or dilemmas or confusions. I shall now do according to your instruction. This is Arjuna's answer. So I was just trying to give an idea of how Gita begins. Gita begins with a question that all of us may ask in our everyday life. At least on several occasions in our life, we may ask this question. I have to do this. Is it proper for me to do? There is no other option but to do this work. But it appears that it may not be okay to do that. There are questions as to the propriety of my duty, my work in front of me. So that the question arises. The question in a way indicates that we are refined, evolved people, only thinking people, cultured people, refined people, people with some spiritual perspective in life alone can feel that conflict. So we should remember, when we feel a conflict in our life, it doesn't in any way indicate that we are wrong or that we are that it is a terrible thing to have internal conflicts. Internal conflicts in a way is a problem, but we should also know very well that internal conflicts are possible only for thinking people, people who want to do the right thing, people who do not want to do the wrong thing, who want to run to desist from doing something wrong, and who want to do things the right way, in the right manner. So that requires a little bit of cultural refinement. So only cultured, refined person will face conflicts in life. So we should remember, conflicts are not necessarily signs or of a very serious critical problem. Rather, they may indicate a particular stage in our own spiritual evolution. And Arjuna had this conflict, so he became a refined, enlightened person at the end of the text you find. And the last verse in the Gita is not from Arjuna or Krishna. It is a statement that comes at the end of the text. It is from the narrator, Sanjaya. So what he says is very interesting. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishno yatra Partho Dhanurdharaha tatra Sri Vijayo Bhudir Dhruva Netir Matir Mama. This is the last verse, 78th verse, the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Wherever there is Krishna, who is the symbol of yoga, and wherever there is Arjuna, who is called Partha here, who is symbolically wielding a bow, it means he is a man of action. So wherever there is these two spiritual symbols blended together, yoga, that is a holistic, comprehensive perspective, a matured spiritual outlook on life. That is what yoga in the ordinary practical sense implies. A spiritual perspective in life, a mature perspective in life, an attitude built upon a strong foundation, the foundation of spiritual common sense. That's what yoga means here. Whenever that spiritual attitude is combined with activity, activity could mean anything. It may be a professor teaching in a university, a doctor treating in the hospital, and during this time of health emergency, you find people who are engaged in different professional walks of life, who are working hard to keep others healthy and happy, putting themselves in the line of fire and putting themselves at risk. So some kind of activity. A student studying in a university, or a farmer doing farming in his field, or a businessman doing business. Any kind of activity. I mean, any kind of activity that is unavoidable in our life. That activity on the one hand, and along with that with a spiritual perspective, rather. When these two combined together, it becomes a total outlook on life, a total and integrated, harmonious, a spiritual outlook towards life. Then what happens? There will be prosperity, Sri, there will be victory, Vijaya. There will be social stability, expansion, a proper policy, a proper social order. This is my conviction. So this is how the narrator summarizes the practical benefit of putting the teachings of Gita in the context of our everyday activity. What happens? On the one hand, we have to do our work, whatever may be that work, pleasant or unpleasant, painful or maybe happy work. We can't avoid it. Even to live in a very ordinary life, you have to do something. Physical activity, intellectual activity, emotional activity. Some kind of activity is unavoidable. But frequently, for refined people, there are times when we are not sure whether the activity that we have adopted as our duty is okay or not. Appears to be full of contradictions, uncertainties, imponderables. So how to solve the problem? Bring yoga into everyday life, everyday activity. This is the teachings of Gita, the central teachings of Gita. Now we will go to some of the basic teachings here. And how to bring this in the, of course, I shall try to take just a few verses from here. Here there is one statement. This yoga outlook could be brought into our everyday activity in all spheres of life, at all levels of our life. So, kayena manasa buddhya kevalair indriyairabi yogina karma kurvandi sangam tektva atma shuddhaye. So, it's a verse in the 5th chapter, 11th verse. So, those who practice this unique blending of action and yoga. Action means everyday activity. It need not be just a philosophical discussion. Any kind of activity. So, There are in the previous verse, Pralaban, Visisan, Grinhan, Unmishan, Nemishan, Nabi. I mean, when you see things, when you hear things, when you handle things by touching, when you smell things, when you eat your food, when you're traveling, when you're going, when you sleep, when you breathe, when you speak, when you open your eyes, when you close your eyes, practically, not only a deliberate action, every movement of our body, mind and intellect can be practiced in a yoga way. Yoga here, please remember, has nothing to do with the physical yoga. Yoga here means bringing a spiritual element into whatever we do. So that's why by body, by mind, by intellect, by senses, do everything but give up attachment. This is the central teachings of Gita. So how to do our work without attachment? There are different ways of doing it. Gita recommends 3 equally valid paths leading to this goal. The path of devotion, you go to a temple or a church or place of worship, pray to God, God who is the God of the whole creation, who is present in all of us, who is present everywhere, who is a protector, equally and impartially protector of the whole creation. So you can dedicate all your actions to the Almighty God. That is one way to practice it. That is one unique way of practicing that. Devotion. A very simple method. Those who believe in God will find this very, very simple to do, not difficult to do. And Gita makes it very interesting. Gita recommends some very, very moving methods of practicing devotion. Ananya chindayanto mam yejana paryupasade tesham nityabhiyuktanam yogakshemam vahamyaham. So Lord Krishna himself says, Lord Krishna is depicted as God here, symbol of God. Those who pray to God with a focused mind, single-minded devotion, without a wavering mind, what happens, God will look after their needs. So, what is the benefit, what is the reward that we get from true devotion? It is not mechanical devotion, not ceremonial devotion. Devotion in the true sense of the term. Mentally, intellectually, physically, kayena, manasa, buddhya, kevalerindriyairapi. Mentally, physically, intellectually, at the level of senses, when we do everything and offer to the Lord our actions, then we cannot really do anything wrong. Once we bring this God element into our everyday activity, then we cannot do anything wrong. And so long as we do not do anything wrong consciously, we won't have to face the problem of a pricking mind. We don't have to face the problem of internal conflict. Internal conflict may be due to lack of strong, real faith or a sense of surrender. When this happens, Gita says, if you do everything, then you are actually devoted to God with single-minded devotion. Then there is a reward. God will take care of all your needs. So yogakshemam vahamyaham means If you work for God, that God will see that you won't have to work for yourself. If you do anything in the name of God as a true devotee, then you will not have to work for yourself. Because we are not able to decide what to do and how to do. That's why the whole problem arose. That's the source of Arjuna's conflict. So there is a way to do that. Do it as Swadharma, as our duty. It could be the duty of a policeman, an officer, a doctor, an engineer, or anybody for that matter, in any profession, any walk of life. Duty always creates problems. At the time of doing our work, we may feel the conflict, where we may feel, well, we are not sure this is the way to do it. And then after having done it, we may not get the expected result. And even if you go on doing actions of, let's say, helping others, so to speak, there are some scholars, some thinkers, social reformers who will tell you, just do good for others. That's enough, that takes care of everything. It is certainly a very noble sentiment to think of doing good for others. But to do that, we must first of all arm ourselves with a spiritual armor, with yoga. Otherwise, we may go on doing good for others as far as we understand it, but others may not take it that way. And when others do not take it in the same spirit in which you are doing your work, then we may feel conflict, we may feel disappointed, we may feel that the other person is not grateful, and all these unpleasant feelings will come. So in order to avoid that problem, what we must do everything, kayena manasa buddhya kevalairindriyairavi. The 22nd verse of the 9th chapter tells us. Do everything, mentally, physically, intellectually. Do the best of your ability. Do it as a swadharma, as your own duty. A duty or work that comes to you without your going for it. Then what happens is, first of all, we won't feel a burden on our head. Secondly, first of all, we will do our best for our good and for the good of others. Naturally, the result will be beneficial. And there are some cases in which the results may not be very, very pleasant, apparently. We will be able to take it in our stride. We won't be hurt. We won't feel that we are not reciprocated, even if the reward, the result is not up to our expectations. And that is the psychological benefit of doing everything with a sense of surrender. And then there is a real reward that comes, that is certain. That's not from the person for whom you are doing it. It's the reward that comes from God. That is why Ananya Sindayanto Mam Yejana Parivasade. Lord Krishna says, those who meditate on God and do their duties in the name of God, whether the benefits are happy or not, whether the result is happy or not, whether the other person for whom you are doing all this is reciprocating or not, God will reward you. You won't have to worry about yourself. In fact, that's one of the important lessons in Karma Yoga. When you do things for others with a spiritual outlook, then you won't have to do anything for yourself. Somebody else will be doing everything for you. This is an interesting story in the Bhagavad Purana. It's the most wonderful classic. It's an old devotee who was actually a classmate of Sri Krishna, Lord Krishna. He was a great devotee, very pure, very ascetic, very devoted, but he was extremely poor. So one day, his family members persuaded him, including his wife. See, you are the classmate of Lord Krishna, who is an incarnation, and you studied together in Sandivani's hermitage, the ancient sage who taught both of them, who was running a big forest school teaching the Vedas. So both this old Brahmin and Lord Krishna were together students, the same hermitage. But Lord Krishna became so celebrated he was celebrated all over the world as an incarnation. And this old Brahmin, very simple, very ascetic, but extremely poor, were finding it difficult to make both ends meet. So as I mentioned, one day his relatives, including his wife, persuaded him, you go and meet Lord Krishna, your friend. At first he refused. But after long persuasion, he agreed to go and meet Lord Krishna. When he went there, to Dwaraka, there was a big palace where Lord Krishna was living. He went there. And he went there, it's not proper for an old friend to go empty-handed to meet his classmate who had studied together. So he didn't have anything with him to give as a gift to Lord Krishna. He had only some parched rice, very, very poor, very ordinary item of food used in the villages. That was the only thing he had. So when he reached Lord Krishna's palace, Krishna came and received him with great honor, with great love, and insisted on eating the small little gift the poor Brahmin had brought. It was a moving scene. And he lived in the palace for some days. In the meantime, he forgot the purpose of his visit. He didn't ask for any help. He didn't ask of his friend for any help. And he returned. And as he was walking towards his village, towards his little hut, he was thinking in his mind, I took all the trouble to travel to Dwaraka and meet Lord Krishna, but I forgot the real purpose of my visit. I didn't ask him for anything, and what a fool I was. But when he reached his village and reached very close to where his house used to be, he could not recognize the place. The house, the little hut in which he had lived with his family, with his wife and children, had now become a huge palace. And his children, who were famished little boys, had now become healthy and happy looking children playing in the garden. And his whole family members had undergone a complete transformation. Now this is a symbolic story, what it means. So what it means is, this old devotee, he didn't think of anything. He was only thinking of Krishna when he went to meet him. But unknown to him, Lord Krishna was doing everything for him. The story is only symbolic value. So whenever we do something, either working in the office, in the factory, or whatever it is, people have to work for their family. They cannot always think of working for God. When you're teaching in a university, you're doing let's say you are working in an office, information company, or IT company, or whatever it is, you cannot always easily bringing the idea that you're working for God. No need to do that. What it means is, do this work of yours as a dharma, as your duty, and mentally leave the work and its result to God as an offering. When we do that, on the one hand, mind remains calm and quiet. You may have to face anxiety and strain and all that as part of your duty and work and profession. But that won't have a lasting damaging effect on our mind, because we always think, well, I'm doing this as my duty, offering to the Lord. So that is one very unique message from the Gita. When you work for God, the God works for you. Then He will see that you won't have to work for yourself. He will do your work. This is a unique message. Now this may appear to be a tall order, very difficult to really practice. The prapatti, sharanagati, self-surrender. This is they call it in the Vaishnava tradition. Anugulyasi sankalpaha pradigulyasi varjanam rakshasriti vishwasa goptutva varanam tatha atma nikshepa karpanne sarvidha sharanagati. This is how Vaishnava philosophers interpret this very concept of a good spiritual mechanism of self-surrender to God. Our effort and God's will, God's grace, both are equally important. Our work, our effort, our spiritual practices, our ascetic practices, our devotion, prayers, all these make us fit for God's grace. So one may ask this question, it's not so easy to practice in real life. Arjuna also felt this doubt. In fact, we can go along with Arjuna when we think of this subject. Arjuna actually asked all these questions on our behalf. When we read Gita, we may feel many doubts, many questions may arise in our mind. Is it possible? It all appears to be very simple and pleasant. When we work for God, God works for us, so that we don't have to worry about our own problem. He will sort out our problems. So whatever we do, we make as an offering of it to the Lord. Then we won't have to worry about our own problems. Self-surrender. So these people may ask this question. So Arjuna also asked that question. So Arjuna is asking a question in the 37th verse of the 6th chapter. Aidi Siddhayo Pedo Yoga Chalida Manasaga Aprapa Yoga Samsiddhim Kam Kadim Krishna Gechadi Kachino Ubhavi Brashta Chinna Brahmanashyadi Apradishto Mahabahu Vimudho Brahmanapadi. So 37th and 38th verse. What Arjuna is asking is simple, that many of us should ask as we read the Gita. He says, well, suppose we work hard and we don't succeed in reaching this level of self-surrender, kayena vacha, manasa, indriya, etc. Mentally, physically, intellectually, whatever we do it with a sense of sanctity and sacredness and integrity and sincerity, and then mentally make an offering of whatever we do, our whole life to God. So the whole life becomes spiritualized. So you can feel a huge, heavy burden is lifted off your shoulders. You are bearing the huge burden on your head, but somebody is holding it so that you don't feel the heaviness of the burden on your head. But suppose one strives hard to achieve this, but doesn't succeed, and he dies before he actually reaches this level of spiritual growth of surrendering, or maybe doing everything in the name of God. Then what happens? Does it mean that all his efforts are gone down the drain? He has spent so many years for spiritual practices, but he didn't succeed. There were still conflicts till the end. Even when he was dying, we know very well that he had still conflicts. So does it mean that all the efforts are gone waste? Krishna says no, that it doesn't happen that way. He says, even little bit of effort on your part will have its tremendous positive result. Even an attempt to practice a spiritual value will produce a result. Even if you do not succeed in practicing spiritual value, even a sincere desire to practice spiritual values in our life, faith and devotion in our life, will deposit a spiritual capital in our mental system. It will create a spiritual bank balance in our mental system. And then, when you are born again, in your next life, you will be born with these good results of your simple efforts to practice spirituality. That will come along with you. That will be your spiritual inheritance, your spiritual bank balance. That's why Lord Krishna says, Partha naivega namutra vinasastasya vidyade nahi kalyanar kritkaschit durgadvitata gacchati. Krishna says, no effort will go waste. Whatever you do, or you attempt to do something, even if you take a decision to meditate or to practice these higher values, but you really do not succeed in doing that, implementing your decision, even then, that desire to practice spiritual values will have a beneficial effect, a rewarding effect on the mental system. And Lord Krishna says, Tatradam buddhi samyogam labhade paurvadekikam yatadeja tato bhuya samsiddho kurunandana. It comes the 6th chapter. When you are born again, you will be born with these good results. You may have done very little, maybe in some distant, remote life cycle you may have done. But that good samskaras, that good impressions will accompany you when you are born again. So please remember, Bhagavad Gita is teachings are set in the background of a social, spiritual culture in which the law of karma and the doctrine of reincarnation, rebirth, was taken for granted. So, life is not just one chance. So, no one needs to worry if we could not do enough in one life. Nothing is wasted and you are never late. Anyone can begin his or her spiritual life any day, any moment. And when he or she begins, that will be the beginning of a new chapter in his evolution. So that's why Lord Krishna says, Purvabhyasena tenaiva kriyadehi avashopi saha. So Purvabhyasa means because you have made some efforts to meditate sometime in the past, in one of your past life cycles. It's called Purvabhyasa. Your practices that you have performed, your spiritual disciplines and your practice, sometime in the past, maybe several centuries in the past, in one of your life cycles, that will prompt you, that will help you to move forward in your spiritual life, so that no effort is ever wasted. So Gita actually gives a great promise to all of us. We need not worry even if we do not succeed all the time. And we need not worry that even if we do not succeed, that all efforts will be wasted. No. Whatever we do, it will have a beneficial effect. And the purpose of human life according to Gita, is to come to the end of our life with some higher thoughts in our mind. For that, we should make preparations all through our life. So Gita says, Andakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalebaram. Yaprayadi sadmadbhavam yadi nastitra samseka. So, those who think of God, meditate on God at the time of death, that person will attain me. Means here Lord Krishna uses the first person. I here used in the sense God himself. So the last thing that we should ever worry is that our efforts will ever go waste. Even if we try to do something good in Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, that will have a lasting effect on our mental system. As Bhagavad Purana says in one context, Ante Narayana Smriti. Either by Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga or Bhakti Yoga, Etavan Sankhya Yoga Abhyam Sudharma Parinishthaya Janma Labha Parapumsam Ante Narayana Smriti. Every civilized, refined person should think of not only living in a civilized manner, in a happy manner, but also dying in a happy manner, because death is also part of life. So that's why the Bhagavad Purana says, either by practice of Karma Yoga, by bringing God into every micro moment of our life, by doing our duty with a sense of sanctity and sacredness, by making an offering of whatever we do mentally, physically, intellectually to the Lord, thereby spiritualizing all our activities, our thoughts and emotions. That is one path. Another path is the path of knowledge, Vedanta. And there, of course, there is another path which is, in a way, Bhakti and Karma intertwined in the Gita context, in the Bhagavada context. Surrendering oneself to the Lord and live in the world as a lotus leaf lives in a lake. So that is another important path. Padmapatra Padmapatra means lotus leaf. We can live in this world and leave this world intelligently with a smile when we live in this world without being worldly minded. Living in this world doesn't necessarily mean we should live like a worldly person. Even while living in this world, we can be spiritual. Lotus leaf never gets wet, though it is living in the lake, surrounded by water. Water drops do not stick to the water, the lotus leaf. Like that, we can live in this world, but worldliness should not be in our mind. So if we can compare life into a lake or maybe a river, and our own existence as moving in a boat, then we can say the worldliness, water, need not enter our mind. The boat should be above the water surface. Then only we can cross the river, the ferry. So that's the idea behind. So that's why Lord Krishna says one should live in this world but without being worldly minded. Padmapatra mivampasa, that's the idea behind. In the meantime, Gita projects some very strong and practical methods of living So if you can think of a man like Gandhi, who was not a saint living in the forest. He was a politician, a very enlightened, refined politician, who had a copy of the Gita in his hand all the time. And he says that Gita was his mother. Whenever he had any problem in life, he used to turn to the pages of Gita. And as a mother consoles a child, the Bhagavad Gita consoled him. There are many, many other teachers, both in the West and East, who looked upon Gita as a book that should be held on the left hand while working in this world with the right. So, it is a book not to be just contemplated on, but should be consulted at every stage in our life. How to work, how to think, and how to combine spirituality and secular values in our life. How to practice spirituality in the context of secular life. Gita itself demonstrates how this can be done. Saktaha karmanya vidvamso yadha kurvanti bharata kuryan vidvan tatha asaktaha chegishu loka sangraham. The verse tells us that, let's think of two persons. One person is very active, very efficient, so much driven by the cult of efficiency and perfectionism and result orientation, so to speak, in modern times. But full of greed, full of attachment, full of anxiety and worry about what he is doing and what benefits he is likely to get in course of time. That is one person. Another person, maybe his friend, is equally efficient, equally active, equally driven by success motive and so on. But still, he does everything in a very relaxed manner. Because he is aware of the fact that success, however great success may be in this empirical world, cannot ultimately bring lasting peace and lasting contentment. So this realization of the limitation of success as we understand and define in worldly terms, the realization of the limitation of this worldly concept of success, that will make us seek for a higher kind of success, a different kind of happiness and joy. And that joy and happiness comes out of turning our mind to God or to spiritual values. Gita itself makes a statement, Sukham atindikam yattad buddhigrahim atindriyam. Everyone in fact, is looking for happiness and joy. Every human effort, whether you are trying to make a scientific discovery, you are trying to work hard in your factory or office, all driven by one motive, joy or happiness. Money, success, everything is just a tool, an instrument for feeling relaxed, feeling happy and feeling contented and feeling satisfied. And the satisfaction itself comes as a kind of happy feeling. So every human endeavor is a quest for happiness of some kind or other. But Gita says, this happiness as we understand in worldly terms is only a temporary absence of unhappiness. It's only one side of the coin. Turn the other side and you have got unhappiness. Because no one can be consistently happy in this world. No one can have a continuous, unbroken succession of happy experiences. The richest man, the most powerful man may be happy for some time, but he also has to face setbacks. So that means we should look for happiness somewhere else. We should look for happiness, not in this world. That's why buddhigrahim atindriyam. The real happiness is not within the world of senses, not within the empirical realm of empirical experiences. And that happiness is transcendental. It goes beyond sensory perception. And that happiness comes out of the realization of the limitation of worldly happiness. When we look for the real happiness, then we realize that the real happiness comes only when we are able to look happiness and unhappiness with the same mind. With the same mind, a mind that is established in equilibrium, that mental equilibrium, equanimity of mind, alone can give us happiness. Because when you attain this equanimity of mind, then we are able to look upon happiness and also its opposite, unhappiness, with the same perspective. We will be looking for something that is beyond both. So Gita contains many profound teachings. So even a little bit of understanding of some of these teachings will give us a higher perspective in life. It's a book that we should have in our left hand when we work in this world with the right hand. That's the view not only of saints and sages and philosophers, but also many great men who are very ordinary people, who are not Sanskrit scholars or philosophers, who worked in this world and left this world with a smile because they knew that Gita can point a way beyond this world, a way to attain transcendental happiness and contentment. So it is just an attempt to bring in some of the teachings of Gita. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Rama Krishna Arpanamastu.